How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be installing a dual exhaust on from Gibson Performance on the Polaris RZR Turbo. Stay tuned.
Waited what? A year and a half to get this mod?
A little longer than a year and a half. I looked at this when I was buying it. I just never bought it.
We've probably watched
10 videos. That's all, just 10. It's the same one over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Instructions. Alright, so installing exhausts on all of these are basically the same. There's 2 bolts here and here to get the back plate off, and then that bracket right here is what holds the plate itself. We're going to be taking those off on either side, and then there's hangers, there's a spring on the top and the bottom, and basically 3 bolts on this. So it should be pretty straightforward. Alright, so the first thing we got to do is take the battery out, which is located under the driver's seat right here. Take the seat out, very easy. And taking off the negative terminal, should be a 10mm. Alright, I'll leave that here for now. Now that we have the battery disconnected, we have 4 T40 bits, which is basically what the RZR's held together with. We have 4 T40 bits we've got to take off. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, now that we have the heat shield off the back, the next thing that we have to do is remove these OEM brackets that hold that heat shield. We have new ones that we're going to get supplied. This is a 10mm to get these off. Okay, now that we have those brackets off, the instructions actually get a little wonky here. It's telling us that we should drill a hole for the bracket that holds the exhaust pipe right about here. But we don't know exactly where, so I don't want to drill the wrong hole. I assume that the top bracket goes to this hole right here. Problem comes is that on the other side, when we start looking at it, I don't really want to start messing with this too much because there's a heat shield here, and well, obviously RZRs are set to catch on fire quite a bit, so don't want to do that until we know exactly where that hole is going to be. So we're going to skip around from what the directions say a little bit. We're going to start releasing these 3 bolts here, and then we have a couple of things back here, and then we'll get this off. Alright, so to get the muffler and pipe off of the actual bike itself, you have 3 bolts here that you have to remove that are connected to a couple of studs on the back. Should come off pretty easy. The bike's only about a year old. If yours is a little bit older and maybe a little bit more rusted on there, you might have to replace those studs. I was reading that up online. So look into that, make sure that you have an availability before you start doing this. Okay, so now that we have those bolts off, there are 2 springs, one here and one up here. A little tricky to get to. These can do the trick. Tighten them up right. A little bit tighter maybe. Should just pull right off. And this one's a little tricky just by the way it's in here. It's actually hooked over the wrong way, but you should be able to do into. Okay, now now that those are off, fingers crossed, that's it. Now again, this bike is not that old. It's only about a year and a half old, and I clean it pretty well every time, so it's not very rusty or very abused. This gasket, the exhaust gasket here, I'd recommend going to your dealer and getting another one just in case, that way it doesn't leak. This one's not in bad shape. It got a little bit of crustiness on the sides and everything, but the internal portion is very clean, so we're just gonna go ahead and reuse this one. All right, so we tried to test fit the pipe a little bit before the video so that it would look good, and we realized that what they're looking at here is actually this bolt. This is a 10 millimeter. We're gonna go ahead and remove this and reuse this bolt itself on that hole. Then they'll use the other bolts that are included for this top part, and on the other side is probably gonna be the same thing, that the bottom hole that we can drill out. So we'll show you that on the other side when we get there, but it should only be one hole on a 2016 XP Turbo that you have to drill. So let's get to that. All right, let's do a quick test fit. Sorry about the rain noise, it's South Florida. All right, so if you look over here, you can actually see that hole lines up pretty well. So we're gonna go ahead and put the bolt in that one and leave it loose so we can move it around a little bit, but that's gonna be our money shot. All right, so it looks like this hanger right here actually holds the tail lights themselves. Looks like that's the hole that we're gonna use. So we probably don't even actually need to drill that out. It seems to already be threaded. We're gonna try to use it if we can. If it's not, the directions do say to drill out that threaded hole, so we'll go ahead and do that. All right, so the bolt didn't fit. We're gonna go ahead and use a 1/4-inch drill bit, like they said, on this bottom hole and go ahead and drill that one out. Just be careful because there are lines behind here. Don't hit those. All right, so after drilling it out and having to put a little muscle behind it, the bracket, actually the hanger is actually on the bracket. We put a bolt through it pretty easily. I'm gonna take that bolt through, and then we're gonna have, there's a little washer that I didn't grab, and then the bolt is gonna go across the back, and the same thing, we're actually gonna have this. We're gonna have one of these big washers behind here. We're gonna line it up, and we're gonna leave it all a little bit loose, and I'll put the bolt through there as well, and then that'll hold this side. We'll reverse it, do the same thing on the other side. Line the exhaust up and then tighten everything down. All right, so we started off with these. Not gonna fit in here to get this spring to hold the top part. Went to the needle nose version, and it should go in here pretty easily. And all right, now that all my eyes are still intact, let's try it again. There is a tool for this. You don't have it. All right. It'll buff out. All right, now that we got the exhaust hangers installed, we snug them up a little bit, left them loose until the end, and we're gonna use the factory bolts on the studs for the exhaust flange. It. All right, so this was on the instructions to do first. We waited till last because it was a little easier. But these are the brackets for the, I guess it's a beauty plate, whatever, in the back. the shield. Use extension, it's 10 millimeter, using the factory bolts, and the bracket does face in on both sides. So, all right. So before we put the heat shield UV plate on the back of it, we're going to install the exhaust tip because we want to make sure that when we snug everything up, that there's a 1-inch clearance on all the pipes whatsoever. We don't want to be too close to this up here. We don't want to be too close to any wiring or anything that we had to take off. On the other side, we did have to move one of the wires itself, so we have to kind of reroute that. We want to make sure there's plenty of clearance. All right, as you see, there is plenty of clearance up here. There's plenty of clearance on all these lines, anything down here. We also have this cable. This is a good thing for the taillights in the back. What we're gonna do is we're gonna wire it up underneath of this, and that'll keep it nice and far away from any of the pipes. We have probably 5 inches there before it touches anything. So we should be good to go. Plenty of clearance here as well. Okay, so now we're gonna install the heat shield in the back, and these holes up top, they do supply, you use the factory bolts, but they are not threaded like the factory ones are. So you do have a nylock bolt, or sorry, nut and washer. Okay, so what I found the easiest thing to do to get these bolts in here and actually get to the nuts and hold them on the back, I think you should use them and as basically a placeholder and to hang this from. And I attach the bottom first. So these are the factory ones that are threaded, so it'll help us line the hole up and make sure that hand thread them first. But
What about that hand thread?
all about that hand thread, bro. Why you hand thread? That one did not go in easy. All right, now that we got everything basically installed where we want to have it, we're going to go ahead and put the bolt and nut onto the exhaust tip themselves, kind of position them how far in or out we want them. Then we're going to go around on every nut, bolt, everything, tighten them, torque them to spec. I don't know, tight, good and tight. All right, so now that we have it all installed, we need the supposedly the ECU has to learn that it has an exhaust attached to it, so we disconnected the battery. We're gonna reconnect it, and we're gonna go ahead and give it 30 seconds or so, put the seat in, and we're gonna just go ahead and start it and give you guys an audio sample. All right, so here you have it. We have fully installed the Gibson dual performance exhaust. Obviously, this is the black version. It does come in a chrome version as well, if that's your taste. We've tightened everything up, we've checked everything. It should be good to go. We're gonna start it up for the first time. We've connected the battery, we've torqued everything the way it should be. We've adjusted the tips, we put the tips in the proper spots, we've leveled everything. It's all ready to go. There will probably be some condensation when you first start it up. I'm sure there's stuff inside of the exhaust itself. It is South Florida, it is humid. So if you see a little bit of condensation, don't be worried about it, it is normal. Just so you know, I purchased this exhaust for the simple purpose of I want to get it tuned here in the next couple of weeks. I'm probably going to go with a Super ATV Stage 2 or Stage 3 tune. With that, you don't need an exhaust, but obviously an exhaust helps. So this should give me 2 to 3 wheel horsepower and 5 to 7 foot-pounds of torque. I think that's what it is offhand. I mean, it's going to be negligible. You're not going to really feel it. If the exhaust in and of itself gives that much horsepower, I'd be surprised. I think it'll just free it up a little bit, but it should actually make the turbos run a little bit cooler, or turbo run a little bit cooler as well, because in the stock muffler, there's actually a restrictor of some kind. I don't know if it's a cat or whatever inside of the muffler, but this is free flowing and it's not in there, so the turbo itself should run cooler because it has less back pressure on it as well. That may be where they're getting their performance numbers, but who knows. let's start it up for the first time. Well, the electronics work, which is good. So I don't know if you can hear it in the video, but you can actually hear the turbo sound a lot louder. The turbo is located back in over here, so none of the piping going to it was changed, just that itself, but with that less restrictive, I think that it actually will allow the exhaust to be just a little bit louder and be able to hear those turbos a little bit better.